A stone for a stone. Don't like these names. The grizzled Varushkan scowled, his displeasure written all over his face. It's too dangerous. She rolled her eyes. As much as she enjoyed her guard's company, the constant protectiveness was a burden when it got in the way of her work. We've been through this a dozen times already, Lessig. I am going to the Jotun camp, and you are going back north to wait here for me to return. Gerard would say no, it's too dangerous, he wouldn't let you do this. It was the wily Varushkan's last roll of the dice. He'd left this argument to the last, fearing it wouldn't work even if it was true. Gerard LaSalle is 1,000 miles away in the Castle of Thorns. I will be perfectly safe. Please let me go with you, Nimes, he pleaded. I'm sworn to protect you. She almost took pity on her old travelling companion, but she steeled her heart. Much as she desperately didn't want to do this alone, she had no choice. Lessig was an experienced and canny warrior, 5 years of service in the Imperial Army, promoted once for courage and twice for loyalty. There were few more intimidating, a wall of muscle encased in steel with a brutal scar running down his left cheek, just in case anyone thought it was all just for show. If anything goes wrong, then you can't possibly protect me. Jarl Hakon has what? 50,000? 60? Are you going to fight them all? The grim Schlachter scowled again. Being unable to deny her logic wasn't making him any happier. I'll be fine, Lessig, she reassured him one last time. With you, we'd both be in terrible danger. The Jarl might see you as a threat and attack. But alone, I will be absolutely fine. I will be safer in that camp than I would be in the Castle of Thorns. The Jarl won't let anyone harm a hair on my head. You don't know that, he retorted. You're just guessing. Now it was Naomi's turn to look annoyed. Her eyes narrowed, a sure sign her temper was rising. I'm a prognosticator, she retorted. I never guess. Overview. The Imperial Senate has commissioned Naomi of Virtue's Rest to explore ways to make peace more appealing to the Jotun. As part of their appraisal, Naomi has prepared a short report examining relations with the Western barbarians. The Imperial Senate has instructed Naomi of Virtue's Rest to appraise what might make peace more appealing for the Jotun. It is an astutely worded appraisal. Naomi is a skilled diplomat, but few expect her to be able to deliver peace with the Western Orcs on request. But if there are steps that could be taken to help engender a peace in the future, then the prognosticator is the one most likely to find them. Naomi has done what work she can in the Empire, talking to the Marcher Orcs who know the Jotun best, studying the history of the Empire's wars with the Western barbarians to see what patterns she can discern, and looking at the most recent conflict to try to understand the causes of it. Finally, with few other good alternatives, she made a short trip under a flag of truce to speak with the Jotun in Mornwald. The journey was dangerous, but she reports that the Jotun treated her well. And though she gained only a limited opportunity to talk with any of the Jarls there, it was enough to confirm her ideas held water. A long history of war. The Jotun are born to war, conquerors by nature who seek an honourable death in battle. The Empire has always either been at war with the Jotun, or preparing to be at war with them during brief interludes of peace. Throughout Wintermark and Imperial history there have been sporadic periods of peace with the Jotun. During the reign of Emperor Guntham, the Empire and the Jotun even allied together to fight a sustained campaign against the Thule. However, these periods of peace have never lasted long, rarely more than 5 or 10 years at the absolute outside. There appear to be 2 reasons for this. The first is that Jotun claim that much of the Western Empire belongs to them. They claim that Semasuak, Hanmark, Calavesa, Mitwald, Mornwald, Karaman and Segura, or at least part of them, all belong to the Jotun. There is even a sept of orcs in Tromsø that claims that before the Turunial came, the woods and peaks of Hercynia were their domain. The orcs regard these lands as fundamentally Jotun in much the same way that the Marchers view Mitwald as Marcher lands or the people of Dawn view Astolat as Dornish. According to their history, they have been systematically pushed from their lands, forced ever further westwards. In their eyes, they are fighting a war to try to recapture the lands they have lost to the Empire. Perhaps more important, however, are the Jotun beliefs. They are a devout people. Their Godi, their priests, are second only to their Jarls in importance. The Godi teach them that they can only cross the Howling Abyss if they die in battle fighting. The Jotun dislike of open water seems to stem from this. Their warriors seem to have a dread fear of death by drowning. This belief ensures that the Jotun have to be at war with someone almost all of the time, otherwise they're condemning their warriors to oblivion when they die. One of the things that makes peace with the Jotun so difficult is the Jotun prize worthy opponents above all other things because they believe the more worthy the opponent that kills them, the more likely the Fathir are to choose to take them over the abyss. The more respect the Jotun have for someone, the more keen they are to go to war with them. A lasting peace with the Jotun therefore looks almost impossible. There are no scenarios where the Empire would ever be likely to give up the lands the Yatun claim as their own, and it is not clear the Yatun even want them to. In negotiations, the Yatun have repeatedly demonstrated that they would rather have the chance to fight for something and claim it in battle than be given it. Nonetheless, there have been periods of peace. The Yatun use these periods to fight other nations, fight each other, or more often to build up their strength in preparation for their next war with the Empire. The Yatun refer to these periods of peace as rests, a chance to recover their strength like a long night's sleep. It is outside Naomi's capabilities to provide the Empire with a way to secure an enduring peace with the Yatun, but she does have some ideas that would help stop the fighting for a few years. A short history of war. Relations with the Yatun have been fraught since the death of Empress Britta. Naomi's first action is to look at the recent history with the Yatun, the events of the last 10 years. In spring 377 YE, the Imperial Senate guaranteed safe passage to Anvil for a delegation from the west. Such a delegation arrived that summer and successfully negotiated a ceasefire with the Empire for 2 years. There was a request to extend the peace treaty in 378 YE, which was initially rebuffed by the Imperial Senate, but that rejection was itself vetoed by the Imperial Synod, leading the Senate to change its mind and later pass the request. That meant that the peace should have lasted until the start of the spring equinox 380 YE. Unfortunately, the Yatun used peace with the Empire as an opportunity to attack their neighbours, first the Farad'n and then the Orcs of the Lysambrian Hills. The Empire intervened in both conflicts. No armies were sent, but scores of independent military units were sent to Farad'n to try and help them hold off the Yatun. In the end, it was enough to ensure that the Yatun knew they were there and taking part in the fight, but not enough to make a difference. The Farad'n were defeated and forced to sue for peace on Jotun terms. Messages from the Yatun made clear that they were furious about the Empire taking sides in the fight. The fragile peace still held, but it would definitely break if Imperial forces fought against the Yatun again. With the Farad'n defeated, the Yatun invaded the lands of the Lysambrian Orcs, seeking to subjugate them. The desperate Lysambrians sent diplomats to Anvil to beg for aid, and a hasty treaty was drawn up. The new Imperial treaty required the Imperial Senate to abrogate their ceasefire with the Yatun, allowing Imperial captains to march to the aid of the Lysambrians, but no word of this decision was sent to the Yatun. They are known to have been infuriated by what they perceived as an act of treachery, the breaking of a sworn treaty. Despite this, there is evidence that the Yatun still attempted to agree terms for the war with the Imperial generals. There are accounts of a meeting between the Yatun Jarls and the Imperial generals where both sides agree not to use wide-scale destructive magic against the other. Unfortunately, there seem to be no official records of this agreement, and it does not appear to have been ratified by the Imperial Senate. But, if such terms were agreed, then the subsequent violation of the agreement undoubtedly served to further anger the Yatun. Spring 380 YE marked the beginning of a year of bloody warfare between the Empire and the Yatun, with Imperial forces smashing into the Jotun armies in the Mornwall, trying to break them and drive them back. The Yatun committed themselves to a heroic defence of the lands, refusing to cede even an inch in the face of the attack. Thousands were killed on both sides, a pattern that continued in the seasons to follow, culminating in the terrible curses unleashed almost exactly a year later. Although the Yatun were victorious, it was a Pyrrhic victory, with around 12,000 Yatun warriors killed by Imperial defenders and the twin curses inflicted on the territory. Worse, the combination of fell magic employed scythed through the population of the Mornwald, killing nearly 1 in every 6 people, both Orc thralls and Imperials. The young and the old were especially vulnerable. The losses broke the strength of the Yatun armies, and although they were able to complete the conquest of the Mornwald, they could not hold it. The Empire returned in force the very next season, the Iron Helms leading the way, cruelly butchering any Yatun they could get their hands on. Some might argue that the curses were a Pyrrhic victory for the Empire also. It turned the Mornwald against the Empire, a resentment that still lingers in Brega's Land and parts of the Marches to this day. Worse, it filled the Yatun with hatred for the Empire. They claim to have a sacred obligation to protect their thralls. The Yatun are supposed to fight and die to protect those who labour on their behalf. They believe themselves dishonoured by the Empire's curses. They have utterly rebuffed every single peace treaty by the Empire since that day. The Jarl of Kurheim has repeatedly said that the Yatun cannot declare peace with the Empire until every single Yatun warrior who was dishonoured that day is dead. They have kept to that position ever since. Fighting with honour. The Yatun respect the heroic efforts of Wintermark to match their honour on the battlefield. Recent freeborn efforts seem to have significantly improved their standing in Yatun eyes. The Yatun absolutely despise the Navarre. The deaths of so many in the Mornwald appear to have been a turning point in the Empire's wars with the Yatun. Since then, some nations have adopted a different approach. This has largely been pioneered by Wintermark, who took the decision to fight with honour when taking the field against the Yatun. The campaign to retake Semasuak after the Yatun captured the territory soon took on a different tone, with the Yatun conspicuously allowing Imperial forces to recover the wounded and the dead from the battlefield. It is absolutely clear that the consistent use of this approach by the Wintermark generals has earned the respect of the Yatun. Correspondence from the Yatun makes repeated references to the people of the Mark regaining their honour. The Yatun seem almost eager to believe that the Winterfolk had somehow lost their honour in earlier engagements, but have now recovered it. After years of this approach, recent events have shown over and over that Wintermark has earned a high level of trust with the Yatun. What this approach has not delivered is any indication that the Yatun have even the slightest interest in a ceasefire. The Freeborn also appear to have won the respect of the Yatun, most notably with the decision to raise a barrow over the Yatun dead slain when Fort Braden fell. This slow move towards respect may have begun with actions taken by Avicenna Ikazami Iguera. It's not clear exactly what the former long-serving senator of Segura did to win the Yatun's respect, but whatever it was made a deep impression. They refer to her as the Golden Jarl. They often refer to the Freeborn as the Golden People. Jarl Ustigar has repeatedly demonstrated that he holds Avicenna in the highest regard. But it is not just Avicenna, at least not anymore. King Gudmund de Arnson sent his daughter to negotiate with the Freeborn and was clear that he regards the people of the Brass Coast as honest enemies. The decision of the Imperial generals not to attack Mount Mahastind during their invasion of Tromsø may have been the most important step in transforming the Jotun view of the nations involved. The bones of their most important ancestor, Ulven, are believed to be interred in the mountain, along with at least 3 powerful artefacts. It is the Jotun's most sacred site, and they made that clear to the Empire, in the belief that if the Empire knew the importance it held, they would refrain from attacking the mountain. Despite these changes, one factor has remained constant throughout all recent relations with the Jotun. They continue to despise the Navarre and regard them with utter contempt. They refer to them as human Druge in tones that make it clear what a grievous insult they consider that to be. They offer no quarter to the Navarre in battle. They don't offer them the choice. They simply kill any Navarre they can find. The loathing the Jotun express for the Navarre seems to have historic roots, and while it has clearly been exacerbated by experiences fighting the armies or facing their champions in skirmishes, it may not affect the ability to secure a cessation of hostilities. Fighting for peace. No single action will make peace with the Jotun. There are steps that could be taken to make a ceasefire more achievable. According to Naomi, there is no one single gesture, investment or act that would make peace with the Jotun, but there are a number of actions that the Empire could take, all of which would help to create some of the conditions that are either necessary for a period of peace to happen, or which would facilitate it. Kill Jarl Hakon. Jarl Hakon is the leader of the Jotun who once ruled the Mornwald. Killing Jarl Hakon is a necessary but not sufficient condition for peace. The Jotun believe they were dishonoured by the deaths of their thralls in the Mornwald. Now they insist they cannot make peace with the Empire until every single orc responsible for protecting the thralls has died in battle against the Empire. The Jotun are absolutely committed to this, prepared to fight to the bitter end, even if it means the destruction of both Jotun kingdoms. Fortunately, it appears that this religious demand does not require the Empire to kill every single Jotun warrior, but it includes every Jotun who is judged to have been responsible for the safety of the Mornwald thralls, especially those Jotun who held the lands where the Empire attacked. Many have already passed. The Jotun are forbidden by their Jarls and their Godi from throwing their lives away in pointless combat. Their ancestors apparently will not take those who fight and die for no reason. As a consequence, the Jotun will usually retreat when a battle is lost, rather than fight to the last orc. But when the Empire defeated the Jotun in Karaman, a large group of Jotun were given permission to fight to the death at Fort Braden because the Godi had consulted the Fathir and identified that doing so would yield a strategic benefit for the nation. Those who died when the fort fell were all Jotun who had lost their honour in the Mornwald. Naomi believes this could be a subtle sign that some of the Jotun leaders may be deliberately creating conditions for peace, but they won't contemplate an end to the war with the Empire while any of the affected Jotun still live. It's impossible for Naomi to identify the names of every Jotun, but Jarl Hakon was the Jarl who ruled the Mornwald. If there is any single Jotun who absolutely must die before there can be peace, it is Jarl Hakon. There is no possibility that the Jotun will stop fighting until Jarl Hakon is dead, preferably at the hands of Imperial warriors fighting him in battle. Killing Jarl Hakon is a necessary but not sufficient condition for peace. Peace will only be possible once the Jarl is slain, but it will not be enough by itself. The Empire will need to take other steps as well. Avoid another Mornwald. The Jotun will not make peace with the Empire if they have been dishonoured. Avoiding another Mornwald is a necessary but not sufficient condition for peace. Wintermark has put in considerable work to repair their relations with the Jotun, repeatedly fighting with honour on campaign to earn their respect. There is no evidence at all that this has made the Jotun want to make peace with the Empire. To the contrary, the Jotun seem more eager to fight Wintermark now they regard them as honourable and worthy foes. Likewise, with the Freeborn, and to a lesser extent the Marchers, the more the Jotun come to respect these nations, the more enthusiastic they are to fight them. However, the Mornwald curses demonstrate the dangers in taking the opposite approach. If the Empire take actions that cause the Jotun to lose honour, such as killing their thralls, then that will make them utterly committed to war against the Empire. This is exactly what happened in the Mornwald when Imperial curses wiped out a sixth of the population. Any similar action in the future would create a similar impediment to peace. Unfortunately, it is difficult to know for sure what actions will cause the Jotun to lose honour. The Attune notion of honour is complex and somewhat arbitrary in Naomi's eyes. For example, they disapprove of magicians calling heralds of winter to fight alongside the armies, but they have no issue with heralds of the summer realm doing the same. The safest way to ensure that no Imperial army accidentally transgresses these unknown rules may be for at least one Wintermark army to fight with honour in any campaign against the Attune. That should ensure that no army can perpetrate the kind of action that will dishonour the Jotun at least. Avoiding such acts is a necessary, but not sufficient, condition for peace. Peace will only be possible if the Empire avoid committing any further atrocities, but it will not be enough by itself. The Empire will need to take other steps as well. Start another war. The Attune want to fight a strong Empire. They will be more receptive to peace with a weakened Empire. They are more likely to accept peace if the Empire start another war with the Thule or the Valorn. It is often claimed that the Attune enjoy war, or that they live for it. The situation appears to be more complicated than that, but they are the most religious of the Orc nations that border the Empire. Their ancestors, their gods, tell them they can only pass over the Howling Abyss if they die in battle against a worthy opponent. These beliefs determine the Attune approach to war. In their eyes, there is no honour in poisoning opponents or in ambushing them. They have no hesitation in seeking to outmaneuver their enemy, but they don't try to ambush them or take them by surprise, and they have contempt for those who use such tactics. The Attune are often considered to know little magic, but that isn't quite true. Rather, they won't use magic like rivers run red in war because they consider it dishonourable. They don't go to war against the Empire for victory, they do it for the chance to fight and die against a worthy opponent. Using magic to kill the enemy defeats the whole point of war in their eyes, reducing a noble act to one of simple murder. The Attune want to retake the lands they regard as theirs, but they don't want to be given them. They want to fight the Empire for them. Crucially, if the Empire was unable to mount an effective defence, perhaps because they were fighting too many wars elsewhere, then the Grendel, the Druge, or the Thule would pounce on that weakness. They would try to turn the situation to their advantage, either by attacking harder or by demanding concessions in exchange for peace. But the Attune would do the opposite. They would be more likely to agree to a ceasefire with the Empire if they know the Empire cannot field enough armies to fight them, and they will make fewer demands of the Empire. The Attune Jarls fight wars the same way their warriors fight. If a Attune warrior came across a sleeping enemy, they would wait for them to awaken and then give them time to put their armour on and gather their weapons. There is no honour in their mind in slaughtering a helpless foe. If the Empire start a war with the Thule, or with the Valorn while they're still fighting the Druge and the Grendel, then the Attune may consider that a good reason for a temporary peace. They would want to wait until the Empire was strong enough to face them. They would view the Empire as a sleeping warrior who must be given time to ready themselves. More so than any other step mentioned in the appraisal, Naomi is careful to point out that no one action is going to make peace happen. Starting a war with the Thule or unleashing the Valorn without taking other steps towards making a ceasefire achievable could potentially be cataclysmic. Inflict a major defeat. The Attune will be more receptive to peace if the Empire has weakened them. They are more likely to accept peace if the Empire inflicts a major defeat on them that leaves them weakened. The opposite approach is also true. The Attune want to put up an effective fight. Their gods do not honour those warriors who continue to fight after the battle is lost. If they are clearly losing a war with the Empire, if they are clearly beaten and unable to field enough armies to hold off the Empire's attack, they would consider that a good reason for a temporary peace. Of course, any enemy is more likely to sue for peace if they're losing. But the Empire's other enemies will all resent being defeated in this way. They would expect the Empire to demand concessions of them for beating them. The Attune would take the opposite view. They won't expect the Empire to demand concessions, though they will definitely resent that any are taken, but they won't resent the Empire for defeating them. Instead, they will respect the Empire for honourably claiming victory. They will assume that the Empire is motivated by the same desire as they are, a wish to oppose a strong opponent who can give them a worthy fight. Just as the Attune will allow the Empire to withdraw from a battlefield when the battle is lost, they believe the Empire should do the same, at least if they are acting in a moral way. If the Empire inflicts a major defeat on the Jotun, one that leaves them weakened and unable to field enough armies to mount an effective defence of their lands, then they will be more likely to sue for peace. Agree terms for war. The Attune like to agree terms for war, which can include agreements for when the war will end. They are more likely to accept peace if the Empire agree terms for a limited war. If the Empire agree terms and then violates them, it will prevent peace for another generation. The Attune are strong proponents of the idea of limited war. In the past, the Empire's leaders have met with the Attune and agreed terms for war. Usually, this takes place on the cusp of conflict, but it has happened when a war is already raging. The purpose of such negotiations is to agree the basis on which the war will be fought. The Attune will usually use such meetings to push for restrictions on the use of wide-scale magic, prohibitions on the use of poison, and so forth. The Empire might be able to negotiate their own terms for the remainder of the current war, potentially even including conditions for what might end the war. If the Empire are able to negotiate terms for a limited war with the Attune, then that will make them more open to the idea of a cessation of hostilities in the future. They will need to be confident that they can trust the Empire to stick to the terms. At present, they are only certain to be confident of a deal if it is vouched for by the Golden Jarl. But there may be other interlocutors who could assure a deal. The Empire could invoke the lictors if they wanted to assure the Jotun of their intention to honour a deal, but doing so presents its own dangers should they prove unable or unwilling to abide by their agreement. There is a clear flaw with this approach. If the Empire negotiates terms for a limited war with the Jotun and then breaks those terms, then it will be a disaster. The personal reputation of everyone involved will be irrevocably tarnished, and depending on how the agreement is breached, it could prevent peace for another generation, just as the curses in the Mormont did. Engaging in such negotiations would be substantially easier if the Empire had an acceptable meeting place where they could meet with the Jotun. Create a new meeting place. The Jotun place great store in hospitality and safe places to meet and talk. They are more likely to accept peace if the Empire commissions a monument as a new meeting place. The bigger the commission, the greater the impact it will have. The meeting place was an unremarkable stone by a wooded glade that was used as a place of truce where the Jotun and Wintermark could meet. The Jotun considered it to be sacred, a place of peace where violence was forbidden. It was used when Emperor Guntham negotiated a ceasefire with the Jotun leaders, but it may well have predated this event. The site was desecrated by imperial citizens in 382 YE, who it is rumoured were acting at the behest of Agrement. The Jotun in the area were slaughtered and the stone destroyed. The Empire ended up paying a Vergild of 200 thrones for the slain orcs, but at the time the Jotun rebuffed any suggestion that the stone might be replaced. Creating a new meeting place would help to create the conditions that make peace possible. It would give the Empire a reliable place to meet with the Jotun, which would avoid them having to traipse all the way to Anvil, something Naomi suspects they resent. The ideal location would be near the Jotun border, which is obviously challenging given the way it can quickly move. Establishing a meeting place would require effective diplomacy with the Jotun. The Empire can't just build something and present it as a done deal and expect the Jotun to be impressed. The Empire would need to overcome the Jotun's current resistance to the idea of a new meeting place and get them to support the idea. The Empire would need to commission a suitable structure and finance it. The Jotun will not contribute to the cost. Since the Empire destroyed the last one, they will regard it as the Empire's responsibility to replace it. A new meeting place could be a simple monument, a menhir or stone needing as little as 3 wains of white granite. But the larger and more impressive the structure, the more impact it will have. Naomi recommends building a feasting hall given how much the Jotun enjoy feasts. If the Empire constructs a feasting hall and invites the Jotun to use it, then they are unlikely to be able to resist. If the Empire successfully creates a new meeting place that is accepted by the Jotun, then they will be more likely to negotiate for peace. Respect the legends. The Jotun place great store in legends and sagas of epic deeds they call guests. If the Empire can arrange matters in ways that mimic Jotun legends and sagas, then it will make it easier to seal an agreement with the Jotun. Like many people, the Jotun have a strong storytelling culture, and they place great store in symbols, legends, and sagas. Some of their Godi learned to perform dramatic guests, epic tales of adventures of Jotun heroes of old. The Jotun believe that these performances attract the attention of those who have gone over the Howling Abyss before them, effectively a way of honouring the gods and ancestors, inviting them to take part in celebrations. Crucially, when events unfold in ways that appear to echo honourable events of the past, the Jotun consider them to be auspicious. There is a widespread belief that if something follows the path of a previous guest, then future events are more likely to follow the saga. For this reason, highly symbolic gestures are often an important part of diplomatic exchanges with the Jotun. The more the Empire can arrange matters to appear like past diplomatic events between them, the more positive the Jotun will be. The Jotun are not simpletons. They won't agree a peace treaty simply because the Empire engineers some pivotal scene of yesteryear in which an important treaty was signed. But if the conditions are right, then they will inevitably be moved to follow the guest, to act in accordance with the story. Some particularly superstitious Jotun are said to be suspicious of any important event that doesn't appear to copy the shape and form of important events of old. Items of worth can be particularly important for these recreations, their presence emphasising the connection to the past. Such arrangements are common between Jotun Jarls. Deliberately trying to arrange matters to reflect details of past events is not considered duplicitous or manipulative. Rather, it is seen as a way to honour the gods while trying to negotiate honestly and openly. Naomi gives an example of how this might work. Emperor Guntham forged an alliance with the Jotun by saving the life of the Jarl of Kurheim when the pair were attacked by a force of Thule. So if the current Jarl of Kurheim was saved by the current Emperor, then the Jarl would undoubtedly be aware of the history of such an act and the significance of it and what it portended. By itself, it wouldn't mean anything, but if it happened at a point where relations between the Empire and the Jotun were improving, then it would make it easier for the Empire to agree an alliance with the Jotun, because that's what happened last time. These recreations may be symbolic in nature, they don't have to be literal. For instance, if a prominent imperial citizen saved the life of an important Jarl, it would resonate with the original story of Guntham. The closer in status and comportment that the individuals were to figures in the original story, the stronger the resonance would be. Identifying the right Jotun story to emulate might be difficult enough by itself, never mind finding objects of worth important to that story or the right people to reenact the roles. But if the Empire can find a way to arrange negotiations so that they recreate events from an important Jotun guest, then it will make it easier to seal an agreement with the Jotun. Resolve the Navarre issue. The Jotun nurse a bitter hate for the Navarre, who they consider to be little more than crazed beasts. Improving the Jotun's view of the Navarre would make it easier to negotiate peace. Alternatively, minimising all military contact between the Navarre and the Jotun would make peace easier in the future. It would also be important to prevent any new issues arising, especially with the Varushkans. The Jotun loathe the Navarre. They refer to them as human Druj and consider them to be crazed beasts that need to be put down. They don't like the Varushkans very much either. They're all too familiar with the work of the Iron Helms torturing and executing their enemy, but they hate the Navarre with a passion. It's not entirely clear how this affects the Empire's ability to make peace with the Jotun. The Jotun seem to regard the Navarre as something akin to the Iron Helm's war dogs, violent, barely controlled, savage animals that the Empire lets off the leash during a war. It is likely that in any negotiation for terms for war, the Jotun would seek to include restrictions on how the Empire could deploy the Navarre armies. It might be possible to change the Jotun's perception of the Navarre. While that would seem difficult, the Wintermark have managed it, and so have the Brass Coast. The Empire could invest considerable time into finding diplomatic solutions to make the Jotun stop hating the Navarre. If they were successful in doing so, it would make it much easier for the Empire to negotiate peace with the Jotun. They still wouldn't like the Varushkans much, but they're on the other side of the Empire and thus less of an issue. Finding a way to improve the Jotun's view of the Navarre might be challenging and almost certainly impossible if the Navarre have no interest in such endeavours. A simpler alternative would be to ensure that the Navarre never fight on campaign against the Jotun. The less interaction the Jotun have with the Navarre, the less offended they will be by their very existence. However, any plan to ensure the Navarre don't fight with the Jotun will likely be fraught with difficulty if the war moves to Liathavan. A moment in time. These proposals are all valid at the autumn equinox 386 YE. As time passes, they may become less relevant. Naomi has prepared a list of actions that she thinks will help create conditions that make peace, albeit temporary, possible. As time passes, the situation will inevitably change, and some or all of these suggestions may lose their relevance. This is true of any appraisal, but especially true where diplomacy with another nation is concerned. Lasambria. The Lasambrians fight alongside the Jotun but retain their own independence and are actively seeking a peace treaty with the Empire. Previous overtures from the Lasambrians have been rejected. This approach represents the final chance to negotiate with them independently of the Jotun. The Lasambrian orcs have a relationship with the Empire that is every bit as complicated and tortuous as the Jotun. They lay claim to parts of Reynos, Kalino, Segura and Karaman, but they have also attacked Feroz in the past. Their small nation was ultimately conquered when the Jotun allied with the Iron Confederacy and the two groups attacked together. The assaults forced the Lasambrians to split, with a third of them taking refuge in the Empire, a third bending the knee to the Jotun, and a third fleeing to the Broken Shore with the help of the Grendel. The Empire taught the virtues to those Lasambrians who had taken refuge in the Brass Coast. The Lasambrians were cynical at first, but eventually they eagerly embraced, not the way exactly, but the virtues. Sadly, this conversion did not lead to a closer alliance with the Empire. Exact events appear unclear, but it seems that the voices in the Senate or on the military council intended to wipe them out, but they were tipped off and fled west to join their siblings who were by then fighting for the Jotun before the fateful blow could fall. As part of her efforts to appraise peace with the Jotun, Naomi of Virtue's Rest and her assistants met with the Lasambrians near the banks of the Scorero River at the point where the borders of Karaman, Segura and Reynos meet. A small camp awaited them, a flag of truce fluttering next to the orange banners of the septs of Lasambria. While members of all three septs were present, Naomi reports that 3 primary diplomats took the lead: Wavar Handjoiner, Lucero Mithril and Esperanza Bladebinder, all 3 being part of the Aero. These orcs have engaged in diplomacy with the Empire, either currently or in previous years, and all 3 are settled in for a long conversation. No representatives of Narkist or Calcia were present. Most orcs who are conquered by the Jotun either become thralls or become Jotun themselves. Perhaps that will happen in time, but for the moment their embrace of the virtues has helped to keep the Lasambrians somewhat distinct from the other Jotun. They fight alongside the Jotun, but they pursue their own objectives and goals. They are less eager for war, but they are filled with ambition, pride and courage and prepared to do anything to recover their lands. That includes trying to negotiate their own peace treaty with the Empire. The Lasambrians may have sworn themselves to the Jotun, but they have none of the thirst for battle that characterises their northern counterparts. They seem to accept that virtue may be exercised in peacetime as much as in war, and it is this that will preserve their souls in death and build their nation in life. They do not especially want war with the Empire regardless of their actions in recent years. They do, however, want things that so far have only seemed possible through war. There is optimism among the orcs present. If the Empire is willing to negotiate, then perhaps no more lives need be wasted. However, they are also cautious. While individuals within the Empire seem keen, so far there has been absolutely no indication that the Empire as a whole has the same enthusiasm. As such, if no agreements can be reached this season, the Lassambrians will have to show courage and acknowledge the unwelcome truth that they simply do not have the strength to achieve their goals on their own. Any future negotiations would have to be done with them as part of the whole Yutun, rather than independently. There are two offers on the table. The Little Sibling. The Lassambrians offer a limited ceasefire if the Empire will cede them the regions of Gambit and Serra de Marta. In exchange, no Yutun army will enter any region controlled by the Freeborn for a period of 2 years. The first is an offer of limited ceasefire, what the negotiators refer to as the Little Sibling deal. While an actual treaty will need to be drafted and presented to the Senate by the Imperial Consul, the actual details are quite simple. The Empire will cede to the Lassambrians, specifically the Lassambrians rather than the Yutun more broadly, the regions of Gambit and Serra de Marta in Karaman. The Empire will also commit to send no Imperial armies into either the ceded regions or into the territory of Rhinos for a period of 2 years. In exchange for this, no Yutun army will enter any territory controlled by the Freeborn for a period of 2 years. This would not only include Karaman and Segura, but any other territory that is conquered by or assigned to the Freeborn within the period of the ceasefire. This offer would include all the armies of the Yutun, not just the Lassambrians. Follow-up questions clarify that while the armies of the Yutun may travel through the Lassambrian-controlled regions of Karaman during this time, they will not cross the borders into Imperial-controlled territory. Of course, Serra de Marta includes 2 Bourse resources, the Imperial seat of the Dalmatian Cliffs and the Freeborn national seat of the Red Depths, both of which would go to the Lassambrians when the regions were ceded. It would be challenging to enact such a treaty without the support of the Freeborn themselves. Any Senate motion that cedes a region or territory of a nation is subject to a veto by the General Assembly or the National Assembly of the nation relinquishing land. The Big Sibling. The Lassambrians will secede from the Yutun and establish themselves a neutral, independent nation if the Empire honours the historical claims of the Lassambrians. The second avenue of conversation, Naomi reports, was somewhat deeper and more unexpected. The Lassambrians and the Yutun of Calcea and Narkist have been in discussions between them for some time and have a bold proposal, one raised with certain dignitaries of Anvil last season. The Lassambrians are prepared to secede from their northern kin and establish themselves as an independent nation, neutral in the wars between the Empire and the Yutun, treating and trading with both, something they refer to as the Big Sibling Deal. The Yutun are prepared to support such a desire, but only if a suitable arrangement can be made with the Empire that honours the historical claims of their Lassambrian siblings. Exactly what this means is apparently up for discussion, although those who were present at the negotiations last season might have a better idea. The Lassambrian Delegation. A diplomatic delegation from the Lassambrian Hills is once again on its way to Anvil. The Orcs are Lassambrian Yutun, barbarians, and thus fall within the purview of the Imperial Consul. They are expected to arrive at Anvil at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. Regardless of all this, the Lassambrians have a suggestion for the Empire. The 3 negotiators from last season, Esperanza Bladebinder of the Hierro, Reyes Aguila of the Corazon, and Pastor Emmanuel of the Escuta will be attending Anvil this coming season. Imanol, a noted scholar of the virtues, wishes to discuss matters of faith with Imperial priests and is especially interested in examining items or people that have manifested spontaneous auras of virtue. Reyes is keen to swap tales of excitement and heroism, particularly with the bold corsairs of the Brass Coast, and to discuss avenues for future adventure if peace is finally established. Esperanza, meanwhile, is keen to hear suggestions from the diplomats of the Empire. Last season, the Lassambrians proposed a treaty. It was made clear that the terms were not acceptable to the Empire. As such, he suggests that the Golden Jarl, the Imperial Consul, and any other interested parties present a draft of a treaty that the Empire might be willing to accept. Should it prove acceptable to our own leaders back home, it could be acted on by all parties as soon as next season. The Lassambrians are willing to hear out all possible proposals, and that they urge the diplomats of the Empire to get creative. The more the deal benefits both parties, the more it is likely to succeed. The diplomatic party have travelled with Naomi and her entourage on the path to Cassanair before splitting off with a small group of escorts to head to Anvil. They intend to arrive in Anvil at 1300 on Saturday of the forthcoming summit. They also pass on a request that the negotiations take place in the Freeborn camp if at all possible. It would only be polite to make sure that as many Freeborn voices as possible could be heard in a matter that concerns them all so greatly. A sting in the tail. The Yutun will try to use any peace deal to either prepare for a future war with the Empire or attack the Farad'n. The last time the Yutun came to the Empire with an offer of peace, they used the time to wage a war of conquest against their immediate neighbours. The Farad'n held them off for as long as possible, but they were forced to surrender lands, wealth and people to the Yutun. On previous occasions when the Empire has been at peace with the Yutun, they've used that time to build up their forces for the next war. One or both of these outcomes is equally likely if the Empire finds a way to make peace with the Attune. Their religious beliefs compel them to war, either to be waging war or to be preparing for it. If the Empire are able to hand them a crushing defeat, then it may take years for them to build their forces back up, and they will likely be quiescent during that period. But if the Empire is forced to agree a peace deal while the Attune are still in a strong position, then they will inevitably march their armies south into Farad'n. Participation. War stories. Many of the events discussed here happened during the Empire campaign. All of the events discussed in the A Short History of War and Fighting with Honour, as well as many others touched on in the Fighting for Peace and Lasambria sections, happened since the Empire campaign began running. Though some of the characters involved will have died or retired, many of them are still active on the field. Now is a perfect time to take out some of the stories about events in the distant days of a decade ago and share them with people who may not have heard them. It presents an opportunity to recount things your character or characters who have since died did in the war and peace with the Attune, and can serve as a reminder that the current state of affairs with the Attune is rooted as much in your actions, players, as in the histories created before the game began. It is also entirely appropriate for anyone who was active during the period following the death of Empress Britta to roleplay that they have spoken with Naomi or one of her assistants, sharing their own opinions on these events. For further reading, please see the page on the Attune. From the Travel Journal of Sarah Fisher of Stockland, Assistant to Naomi of Virtue's Rest. It is the third day of travelling with my Lasambrian companions, and I believe that I'm finally coming to understand more about them as people. While one may learn a lot about someone across the negotiating table, I find that an evening around the campfire can show more of a person's true character to the vigilant observer. I talk, I listen, and I learn about the three orcs who travel with me, and I believe that I learn more about their septs. Pastor Imanol is always keen to talk to me on matters of faith whenever the pair of us are free. He tells me that his title is derived from an old Lasambrian term for shepherd, but he speaks more of protecting those who depend on him than of carefully guiding them to the truth. The sheep of the Lasambrian hills are, it seems, hardier and more intelligent than the slow, easily spooked lowland breeds whose wool is so comfortable. He is quick to question the authority of the Synod even within the Empire, and has several times claimed the true Lasambrians are independently minded and dislike being told what to do. I sense some annoyance from his companions when he says such things. I believe that they dislike being lectured on Lasambrian culture by one who rediscovered his heritage less than a decade ago. When things get tense, Ray's Aguilar of the Corazon is often the one to diffuse the situation. I simply need to give the slightest hint that I wish to hear a story of perilous adventure, and I am immediately obliged. Their stories are often laced with humour as well, as often directed at themselves as not. Ray's is quick to laugh and slow to take offence, yet I also sense something deeper behind that easy smile. They may joke about their life as a bandit before they found the virtues, but I believe that they struggle to reconcile the person they once were with the person they wish to be. Nonetheless, their determination to find joy in every moment is almost freeborn in its intensity, even if it does sometimes infuriate their more reserved companions. Lastly comes Esperanza Bladebinder, with whom I've spent so many hours negotiating. Sometimes one can recognise a kindred spirit across all bonds of species and nation, and in Esperanza I see someone whose dedication to her people's interests matches my own. She is full of drive and sincerity and does not seem afraid to show vulnerability if she thinks that it will get her what she wants. Who knows, had things turned out differently, I might have tried to recruit her to assist me in my duties. Yet I must remain vigilant, for her ambition burns brightly. She often tries to draw me out on the state of the Empire, our wars, our economic situation, our internal divides and alliances. She does not wish to do wrong by us, and I'm sure that she would nonetheless do so in a heartbeat if it was truly to her people's advantage. Her companions are my best allies in distracting her, as she has a habit of treating them like misbehaving children. What have I learned from all of this? I'll have to sleep on it. Perhaps it's just that these orcs who we fought for so long are a lot like us. Spiritual in a way reminiscent of the Highborn, as fun-loving and daring as the Freeborn, and as keen for adventure as the Donish, and prone to arguing as a family of marchers. Hopefully, in time, we'll be able to call them friends again. And if we can't, hopefully we can at least be virtuous rivals.